Okay, so in the last video we talked about how the cash rate fluctuates from one day to the other because of the amount of welfare and tax coming into these exchange settlement accounts. Now what we're going to look at is what the RBA do to ensure that the cash rate actually stays the same every single day. So we don't want the amount of liquidity in these accounts changing because that'll influence the cash rate. So the RBA does something to ensure that every single day after they've set their target cash rate, that the cash rate stays the same. So if the RBA do nothing each day, then the cash rate will be constantly changing depending on whether exchange settlement accounts have more or less liquidity. So what do they do every single day is they're involved in open market operations. And what that means is when the RBA manipulate the cash rate by either buying or selling what we call Commonwealth government securities to influence the amount of liquidity banks have in their exchange settlement accounts. So by buying and selling securities, the RBA is able to influence the amount of liquidity or the amount of cash that the banks hold in these exchange settlement accounts, and therefore that influences the cash rate and eventually the cost of credit through the flow-on effect to other interest rates in the economy. So first of all, liquidity is basically the ability to turn an asset into cash quickly. So for example, cash is a very liquid asset because it can be immediately sold, where other assets that banks have like cash and securities are less liquid. So basically, in really simple terms, either the banks can hold these things called securities, which are basically a form of an asset other than cash, or they can hold cash. The more cash they hold, the more liquid they are, and generally the lower the interest rates are. When they have more securities, they are less liquid and will generally charge a higher cash rate, a higher rate of interest. So if liquidity falls, so for example, if there's a day where the government is receiving a lot of tax and there's a lot of money flowing out of these exchange settlement accounts, what will the RBA do? Well, what they will do is they will increase liquidity in the market by buying Commonwealth government securities, or what we call repurchase agreements. So what they will do is they will buy these securities off the banks. So the banks will sell their securities to the RBA, and that will mean that the banks have more liquidity or more cash in their exchange settlement accounts, and that will boost the supply of cash in the cash market. The RBA will always buy securities if they want to give the banks more money. This puts downward pressure on the cash rate. The bank then releases funds back into the cash market to earn a higher interest rate. So in other words, instead of keeping them in their exchange settlement accounts, because they don't want to keep that extra money they now have in their exchange settlement accounts, because that will mean that they don't get as high a rate of interest. So if liquidity falls, the RBA will buy securities off the banks, give the banks more money. That will help to release pressure on the cash rate and bring the cash rate back down. Whenever they buy securities off the banks, that will force the cash back down and force down the cash rate. If liquidity increases, so there's a day where, for example, there's a lot of welfare given, there will be a lot of money in these exchange settlement accounts. Banks will be really liquid, and if that's generally the case, that would cause the cash rate to fall. So what do the RBA do? They basically sell these Commonwealth government securities so that the banks are less liquid. So the banks buy them off them, and therefore that reduces the amount of cash they have, and that causes the cash rate to go back up. It prevents the cash rate from falling too much because the banks have got too much cash. So they do this every single day. If the amount of liquidity in these exchange settlement accounts is increasing by too much because there's too much welfare, they will try and prevent the amount of cash the banks have, and to do this, they need to sell securities to the banks. If they want to increase the amount of liquidity these banks have because there may have been a lot of tax collected in one given day, they will purchase securities off the banks and give the banks more cash. That's the process of open market operations, and it happens every single day to keep the cash rate at the rate they want it to.